These things were built one at a time. Not that these aren't built one at a time, but it was different. There was a craftsman with a file and some sort of caliper.
Gun has stood the test of time.
Well, yes, it has. It's been here. It's almost not been here many times.
What is up, everybody? Mark on the mic here, across from me, Mr. Ryan Muckenhirn. And today, we're going to talk about one of the most iconic production hunting rifles ever created and still created to this day, the Winchester Model 70.
Cue intense music.
The year was 1936.
That was good. You brought out the old American accent for that, Mark.
Thank you.
Yeah, I like that. I've heard people say that's just the way that the microphone condensed it, and then the speed at which it was played back. Their accents weren't really that way.
Interesting.
But I knew some old boys that were born and would have been adults. I had a customer now deceased who was born in 1919, and he was old by the time he was my customer. He had a little bit of that American accent left.
Not knowing, I wasn't there. I could see that being the case with technology and microphones, perhaps.
I'm sure there's an audio file out there that has an audio file. I mean, like the word audio and then PHILE as an enthusiast.
Okay.
Yeah, not file as in FILE as in file. Somebody can expound on this more, perhaps.
Probably MC Ryan. He probably knows all about it.
He probably does.
What I would wonder, though, if it was just the way it was recorded and relayed, if people, because television, radio was so influential,
they adopted
if people would actually copy it, like, I want to sound like that.
It's like when you embed yourself in Britain. After a while, pretty soon you have the accent.
Yeah.
Yeah. Could be.
Whenever I'm around, people with an accent, for some reason, you pick it up, but there's like an innate thing where like you have a desire to like, I want to sound like that. That sounds cool.
Rubbish.
It's a bunch of rubbish. I'll tell you what isn't rubbish.
Yeah.
The Model 70, Ryan.
Yeah.
This thing's cool.
It's a good gun. It's coming up on a little while in production here.
You've got one here. I've got one here. I used to own one.
Did you?
Yeah.
Mark.
I sold it.
For what? Probably a fancy boombox.
No. I had a Winchester Model 70 compact featherweight in 243.
Dang.
Bought it used.
Yeah.
Off the old Carbello's rack when I lived in Nebraska.
Yep.
And then it shot pretty good. And then I ended up selling it, and I got a Browning X-Bolt Hunter in 243 instead. And then eventually I sold that one too.
What'd you get with that?
Got myself a Glock 19 and $300.
Good trade.
Yeah.
To quote Kevin Costner from the hit movie Dances with Wolves.
Yes.
Great movie. Watch it.
What were we? You and I traded something one time, and then I dropped that line.
Totally out of pocket, too. Like, it was good trade.
Yeah. Ryan, tell us about this rifle. I know a little bit. I've got some printouts here, but it for a long time. I mean, and you and I were talking about this before. I mean, this thing, the Rifleman's rifle.
It is one of the very few. Not military weapons, although it was a military weapon, to have like a namesake like that, the Rifleman's rifle.
Right. I can't. I'm struggling to come up with anything that.
There's a few taglines in our industry, like Remington's Core-Lokt, for example, the deadliest mushroom in the woods.
Right.
Like, or Weatherby, nothing shoots faster, hits harder, or shoots flatter, hits harder, or is faster.
But that's like a tagline.
Yeah, it's not like a namesake.
This was given.
Yeah, bestowed.
Yeah.
The Rifleman's rifle. Yes, aptly named. There's a period of time when these were produced that if you had a Model 70, you get a few options in the place, and we'll go just like post-war, World War II. There wasn't a ton of commercially available firearms anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So, you had your contemporaries, the Remington 700, the Savage Model 110, the Winchester Model 70, and then like the Weatherby Mark V.
Would you say this rifle's biggest competitor, the 700, Remington 700?
Undoubtedly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then for a period of time, too, because the rifle's old, 1936 is when the Model 70s became a thing. And there was a predecessor to the Model 70 called the 54.
Right.
That was, in essence, a Model 70, but also very different. If you looked at the two side by side, like quick glance, and you weren't versed in them, you'd think, oh, it's a pre-64 Model 70. So that rifle's older yet. Remington had the Model 30 that predates the 700. There was the 720, 721, 722, 725. There was a couple of other interesting Remingtons that came and went, in that period. But the 700 was probably the top competitor to this gun. And amongst the collector circles and the gun guy circles, most of them are going to tell you there's no contention. The Model 70 was the better gun.
Mm-hmm. Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but the Model 70, like the Model 54, had like a 2-stage trigger, and it was set up for like open or aperture sights.
Correct.
And then the 700 was evolved to
the 70.
The 70 was evolved to work, more optimally with telescopic weapon sights and things like that.
Later on, yes.
Later on,
yes.
Okay.
Yep. So what was really cool, the very early examples have a stripper clip guide. Because we carried our ammunition in stripper clips.
I did not know that.
Yeah, and when we reloaded, whoosh, right through the old strip clip guide. Pretty clever.
That is clever.
Yeah.
What about the action?
So you're going to break this into 3 types of the Model 70, and we're going past and present.
Mm-hmm.
3 styles. There's the pre-64 design. That's the example that I have here on the table. This is a 1952 production Winchester Model 70. An adaptation of the Mauser action. So we've got a large claw extractor. We have a 3-position wing safety. This is would have been the second variant of safety style for the Model 70. They used to have a little bit of a different thing going on. So 3-position wing style safety off the right side of the bolt. Internal box magazine with a hinge floor plate. Iconic receiver. And it's almost so iconic that I hear more people say Model 70 style receiver as opposed to Mauser type action.
Interesting.
Yeah, even though the Mauser predates it by not quite a half a century, but a long time. Peter Paul Mauser was making Mausers a long time ago.
I mean, you got to think.
Yeah.
That's their association with.
Correct. Yeah. So
that styling.
Yeah, big claw extractor. It's very identifiable. You look at it and you're like, that's a Model 70 style action. There have been some tremendous rifles that were built off of this action too, and I'll name a couple. The Dakota 76, which is an adaptation of the Model 70. The Montana Rifle Company, 1999, an adaptation of a Model 70. The Kimber 84 series, adaptation of the Model 70. The Kimber 82 series. And then a couple other, a little bit more fancy custom builds. I think you can still get a Defiance action with what's called a controlled round feed design to it.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have evolved as a species in rifle design and understood that a control round feed action does not have to have a bolt body length extractor claw on it. We can build that geometry into a bolt face. So control round feed doesn't necessarily mean it has to look like a Model 70 or a Mauser. It can also look like a Model 700.
Gotcha.
A 2-lug bolt or even a 3-lug bolt. But like I said, very, very identifiable, iconic action design. open bridge top, so not closed in, say like a Tika, if you're familiar with that, we've got that flat top over the top. Then post 1964, what you'll hear referred to as a post 64 gun or a push feed gun.
Mm-hmm.
They adopted a style of action akin to that of the Model 700. And really, it came down to economics. It was a more affordable rifle to produce, debatably as reliable. A lot of critics will say like, "Oh gosh, those push feed Model 70s are trash," and I held that thought process for a long time because I think it was just social convention. And then my hunting partner, who is really my catalyst into how I came to own this particular gun, and then also now my curiosity with the kind of the family and the lines and lineages of them. He's remarked to me many times that a push feed Model 70 is as fine a rifle as a control round feed Model 70. It just does things a little bit differently. They're not as refined. They're not as, maybe lovely, but they have a tendency to shoot as good. If there's going to be pitchforks and torches out there burning about how much better a control round feed gun is, that if you're shooting upside down, it makes a difference. If you're shooting dangerous game and you got a guarantee that a short stroke can still lead to a fed round, maybe. A lot of Remington 700s out there and in professional capacities doing exceptional things.
Yeah, there's a lot of push feeds in the world.
A lot of push feeds. And then later on, I want to say it was into the late 90s, early 2000s, the control round feed made a re-debut.
Right.
Into the classics line. And so that's effectively what we have here in this modern variant on the table. So a bring back of the control round feed action and all the things that people loved about them. And there was a whole bunch of...
Do you think that was more to satisfy people who were just like, oh, I want that because the pre-64 has had it and I think that's better? Or do you think that there was like a method to the madness? No, there's a legitimate...
No, this is speculation, but at that time, so I'd entered the industry like 04, 05, and a push feed Model 70 might be a $300 gun, but a pre-64 at that point in time was over $1,000. And so the guns they didn't make anymore were commanding more than the guns they made. They were in higher demand than the guns that they made yesterday. And I think that they looked at it like, we got to bring it back. If we want to keep viability into this line, this iconic rifle, we have to make it iconic again. And so they brought it back.
Well, and by that time too, manufacturing processes had brought the cost down to do that again.
Yep.
So you're not, that cost differential is less of a burden. Because, the difference between, we'll say like a pre-64 and post-64, before making that transition back, you had the control round feed versus the push feed, cut checkering versus press checkering. I believe there were some
stampings versus millings. Small little bits and pieces, and you see the two on the table.
Like even the stock form factor, that changed at all? I feel like that might have been a thing that I read too.
No, well, it depends on the stock, and like the addition of the gun. So there's some transition models in the early post-64 production that look identical to a pre-64 production. You flip them over and you notice the absence of a large claw extractor, and then there's your identifier.
Mm-hmm.
That in the checkering is very obvious. Like you look at press checkering versus cut checkering, and it's blatant.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of turmoil at that transition period between pre and post, and quality on both sides of the transition year waned. So that is to say, late pre-64 Model 70, and this is a bold statement, was not as nice a rifle as an early pre-64 Model 70. An early post-64 Model 70 was not as nice a rifle as a later post-64 Model 70. They got better. They got worse, but then they got better.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Another identifier, if you got a pre-64, if the serial number is below 700,000. It's a beautiful gun.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very sentimental rifle to me, very special.
How did you come about procuring it?
My hunting partner is a very remarkable human being. And as long as I've known him, which we're coming up on 20 years now, he's always been a Model 70 guy. And he is a collector. He's a wildly, versed historian on them. He knows everything about them. He can show you the nuances between, early guns, transition guns, all the different bits and pieces, knows all the strange calibers that they were chambered in, and like all the just little intricacies that go into, almost a century of line production. And just knows them very well. And he's always had them. And he's also a fan of 270 Winchester. He thinks it's the greatest cartridge ever made.
We don't give it enough love. It's a great cartridge.
Sure. Yeah, fine. So
tell me what it can't do.
I'll tell you what it can't do. It can't wear 30-06 on its barrel. So in my youth, when he and I kind of became friends, because I don't think we were friends at first, I think he looked at me like an absolute jackwagon, which he would have been correct. I was like, I'm going to take a stance against this guy, and I'm going to collect Model 700s. It's funny to say it's out loud because, man, did I pour over the internet looking for early Model 700s. I'm going to tell you there was not a money-making proposition to have those in your collection. I had 8 30-06s at one time.
That's not a bad place to be.
Pretty dumb overall. I could have spent that money on more interesting things. But so I was going to collect 700s. He was going to collect Model 70s. He was going to love 270s. I was going to love 30-06s. And that's just the way it was going to be. There was going to be friction there. And eventually, I lost sight of where the disdain for the cartridge came from because it wasn't founded, right? It was just a thing I said in order to have something to say, if that makes sense.
Sure.
And
just to be contrary.
Yeah. And I remember one day we used to do a lot of gun buying. We'd go around central Minnesota and hit a bunch of different shops, just look for interesting and collectible stuff. And we were on our way to, it was a Gander Mountain store. And we're literally pulling into the parking lot. I'm driving. And of course, every time we're together, we debate guns, we debate cartridges, we debate bullets, we debate scopes, everything, you name it, right? And I'm putting my truck.
Do you guys oftentimes find agreement, or do you find comfort in poking at each other with opposing views?
Both.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. Very well aligned on a lot of things. Most of what I know and most of how I think is actually from him, I think, because I probably spent more time with him than most people, in the field and out of the field. And certainly I've hunted with him more than anybody else. And he and I have been all over the country together and seen some phenomenal things. I'm putting my truck into park in the parking lot. And he goes, you know what? He goes, one of these days you're going to walk into a gun shop and you're going to run to the used rack and the perfect rifle is going to be there for you. And it's going to be chambered in 270. And I said something profound, no, over my dead body, that's not going to happen. So we get into this shop, and the gun counter at this particular store was way the hell in the back. And so you had to walk by the fly fishing vests and what's
surprised that didn't stop in your tracks.
Yeah, it's got the ribbon on it, and they dance around and they run with it, and they do the rod. Yeah, and so we get past that. And
you just described a gymnastics discipline.
Yeah, and we go to the gun counter, and the gun area of that particular store was U-shaped, and oftentimes the nicer, more bespoke pieces were on the left, and my budget items were on the right. I went right, he went left, and the first thing that I saw was the golden Weatherby W on a trigger guard, and then Weatherby's very famous Fiber Mark stock in the used rack. And it was a 6-lug gun, so small frame. And I walked over there And this is a Weatherby Mark V fiber mark in 270 Winchester. And it was priced as a Vanguard.
Oh, dear.
And immediately I knew what I had to do. I had to buy the gun. Literally put my truck in park, and he said, the perfect gun will be there. It'll be a 270. Walked in the door, lo and behold, there it was, a 270. And I picked it up, and like I didn't even look at anything else. I go to the counter. He's like, well, what is that? And I go, nothing. And he flips a tag. He goes, you're not buying that. And he goes, take it from me. I go, I am buying that. So at the time, I was a Weatherby dealer, and I think that my cost on that rifle was somewhere around like $1,700, and I think it was $499. And I'm like, I will take this gun. And I think I owned it for 60 days.
Were you like antsy until like the transaction was finished, like worried that they were going to sort out what
and that he was going to bludgeon me and overpower me and take over? I think I owned it for 60 days. And then finally he's like, you're never going to shoot that gun. You're never going to use it. You're never going to hunt with it. Sell it to me. You don't want it. It's a 270. You hate that cartridge. And I did. I sold it to him. And then that paid for my mule deer hunt that year. Anyway, long story short, we hunt more and more together. We go more and more places. And I begin having an appreciation for older firearms. Because I've been doing guns for a long time. I've pretty much owned everything that I've ever wanted new. There not much like excites me that much anymore in new guns. Not that they're bad, but like it's just kind of the same thing, just with a different paint job, so to speak. There every so often, I just picked one up the other day. It was kind of a neat design, a new gun, new production gun, but nothing really grabs me. But I've absolutely fallen into
the gun. We were talking about this earlier, and I was like, Ryan, that from a form factor, from an aesthetic, I would say.
Yeah.
It was like I was surprised. It was the anti-Ryan.
Yeah. Mechanically, it represents something fantastic.
Right.
But old guns, I have a tremendous amount of admiration for. And he and I had started hunting, I think it was 2015 or so, with black powder cartridge rifles. So I shoot an 1885, like a high wall, and he shoots a Sharps pattern gun. And we actually did a lot of hunting with him. I think I went 3 or 4 seasons working for Vortex optics without using a rifle scope on my guns, because I was shooting peep sights on 4570s. And I killed a pronghorn and a mule deer and a whitetail with it, and I hoped to kill an elk and a bear and a bison with it and be really quite happy. But that moment was somewhat catalytic in creating a love affair for me for like older vintage rifles. And so the rifle stands on its own, right? But I wanted a Model 70 in 270, and I wanted his Model 70 in 270 because he's a special dude to me, and I want something that embodies him and what his style is and that kind of thing, and caliber that he loves. And it took me a little bit to kind of talk him out of one. I don't know if he thought I was trying to like goof on him or something, but it took a little while. But I did. I got one out of his hands. And this is a gun that, I told him I want a shooter. I don't want a showpiece. I don't want a new in box grade or a super grade, or I don't want something that I'm afraid to hunt. I want something that I'm definitely not going to be afraid to tear through the sagebrush and the rocky places where he and I go. And that's what I got. It's a clean-ish gun, but it's been well loved and well used. And I'll tell you, it shoots like an absolute demon. It shoots so good that, I look at a lot of my new guns and I just shake my head and I'm like, come on, boys, you can do better than that.
Well, I think it was just this year.
Yeah.
You were doing some work with this before you guys headed out for kind of your annual antelope trip.
Yep. I've had the gun for a couple of years. This was the first year. It was a whole thing. I had to find the right scope. I had to find the right base. And again, when you're working with, you can buy modern bases for them. You can buy modern scopes, obviously, for them. Every year I mount up a pre-64 Model 70 with a modern, an LHT or a Viper HD or Viper HS or something like that. Every year one comes in. I wanted a period correct vintage setup. So I collect older rifle scopes and have for a long time. So I've got like a whole box full of Weaver K series, Redfields. I'm on the hunt for some older Leopolds. I'd like to get into some of the older European scopes too. They're a lot harder to find stateside, or they've been unfortunately pretty well damaged after nearly a century of service. But I had this old Redfield 3-9 that is actually exceptional, and beat the living tar out of the thing on the test bench, trying to make sure that it held zero and tracked, and it does. And then I found a set of new old stock rings and bases from pre-1964.com, which is
that's cool.
Yeah, probably the internet's foremost resource for pre-64 rifles, parts, information on the weapon system itself. If you needed replacement sling swivel studs, or if you needed, whatever. And they had new old stock Redfield JR rings and bases, and put it all together. I think the scope's the oldest piece on there. It's probably 1967, 68. The scope was built. Again, the gun was 52. The bases are period correct for, an early 60s setup, and put it together, and went down to my reloading bench and opened up the Barnes manual. I had some 130 grain TTSXs that I had purchased a couple years ago, and I've got a whole ammo can full of 270 once fired brass. Pulled out 100 pieces of Federal, decapped, resized, reprimed, and threw 3 loads. The first load I threw in it shoots well under MOA and shoots way faster than I think it should. I don't have a reasonable explanation for how fast it shoots.
What were you getting out of it?
I'm kind of embarrassed to say, but like 3,200 feet per second.
Okay.
Yeah. And I'm well below book. So like the nominal loading, or the standard loading, was 130 at like 30-60.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's like a super fast barrel or what. That same lot of powder I load in 6.5 Creedmoor, 243, 30-06, a whole bunch of other cartridges. Not like a hot bottle. The bullets are the bullets. The primers are the primers. I just think it's a pretty exceptional bore, and it's like it's an absolute tack driver. It shoots unbelievably well.
I remember you sent me a picture of that group, and I was like, it was legitimately impressive.
Yeah. The rifle's 8 years older than my dad, and it shoots really, really, really good. So I hunted it this year. I didn't kill anything with it though, which was kind of my bad. I killed a pronghorn with my 6 ARC on opening day, and then one of the guys that was in the hunting party, he a lot of times hunts with a handgun, a revolver, and he and I set out to go find a couple does. And where we were hunting on the ranch that we were hunting was not going to be conducive with a handgun. So I said, "Here, take the Model 70." And he smacked a huge doe pronghorn, and when I say air quotes around huge, pronghorn are really big, right at like 297 yards.
Okay. And
absolutely drilled her, and rest was history. He's a gun writer. Hopefully he has an article about it with the old vintage gun. But yeah, super cool. I like I said, the rifle is much more sentimental than it is significant because it's not an exceedingly rare gun. It is a perfect representative sample of what is the iconic Winchester Model 70, the rifleman's rifle. And I think that the caliber designation also stands with it too. Jack O'Connor was very, very famous for toting a Model 70, and very specifically one in 270.
Yeah.
He also ran a lot of other stuff and a lot of other cartridges. That was one that he was pictured with a lot. And I think he was very much responsible for the success of that rifle commercially during his tenure as a writer and a hunter. And
the influence of established gun writers, early on.
Yeah.
Remarkable.
Absolutely. And they were truly at that time the industry experts on things, in that they would get contracted by firearms manufacturers, ammunition manufacturers, accessory manufacturers, like weigh in. You're the SME on this. It's like
Yeah, they had. I mean, to your point, influence on manufacturers, and the consumer.
yeah, absolutely. And so again, the whole ethos behind the build, not that this is a podcast necessarily on this specific rifle and whatever, but the whole ethos behind the build is, would this be like a proper emulation of something that O'Connor would have carried? And I think so. I think
I would say yes.
Yeah, it does a decent job. I don't know necessarily what kind of optics he was always running, but it was, like I said, period correct optic. I wanted something that if a sportsman back in the mid to late 60s had a rifle, what would it be? And this is it. A super cool gun.
Yeah, to your point, it really, this one in particular, it embodies, like, if you told me to paint a picture or describe like a good old Winchester Model 70, it would be a gun in this condition, chambered in 270. And this gun is like, it's not in bad condition.
No, it's been hunted.
But it's been hunted, and it shows some wear, and frankly, I love that about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, I like this gun. Like, I would prefer to own this gun as well versus some pristine in-box, like, oh, look at it, but don't touch it, Like you said, you go pick this up and go traipse around the woods or the prairie and
I can promise you,
see what you can't scrape up.
Before I got up here, I was blowing out a whole bunch of red dirt from Wyoming from the objective of the rifle school. So it's it's one that I'm gonna carry and hunt with. They can bury me with it, I guess, or incinerate me with it, whatever.
No, why would you do that?
It's way more
idea.
No, it's perfect.
Burn the gun?
Well, and me. Together.
Just you.
Okay, fine.
Seems to be criminal to do the other.
I suppose.
Good point. Nobody's going to, when we're gone, right? Nobody's going to carry us around the woods.
That's true.
I mean, think of the odor. Gross.
That's true.
But the gun can live on.
That's true.
Also on the table, honorable mention.
A post-64, but current Model 70. This is a cool gun.
Model 70, I believe this is the Safari Express in the classic 375 H&H.
Yeah.
Ryan, we just did a podcast yesterday with the niece, Mr. Paul Niece, talking about hunting primarily South Africa. And not that you would need, and I said this kind of in this pod, not that you would need a 375 to hunt plains game, because you most certainly would not. But I would consider doing it with 375 just to be in Africa with a 375 H&H and a gun that probably looks like this, and I'd probably end up shooting a Diker or something.
Yeah, this is a really cool gun. If you look at like a Model 70 Alaskan, which would have been the pre-64 variant, right? So the 375 H&H back then. And you look at this gun, they're pretty close.
Real close.
Yeah, they're pretty close. There's some treatments to the gun that are consistent with what we would have seen on the rifles of yore. And then there's the modern take on it. And one thing, there's probably some Model 70 aficionados out there that are like, get this kid off the air. A few things that I both appreciate about the old and appreciate about the new. Like, I'm looking at the old right now, 52 production. I can see where the hand filings were done on the barrel after the front sight assembly was brazed on. And you can see the tooling marks, and you can see that everything was imperfect. And by imperfect, though, I also want to inspire one at a time. Like these things were built one at a time. Not that these aren't built one at a time, but it was different. There was a craftsman with a file and some sort of caliper and some measuring devices and all these things, and he was clocking all the bits and pieces and fitting them and touching them again and again and again until they lined up. And you can see those little imperfections, and you can see those little details in the old gun where the grain structure of the metal on the barrel changes direction from where the polishing agent was used or where the file had slipped. Where the new guns, you can't see a tool mark on them. And I'm not saying I don't appreciate that. In fact, I do appreciate that because they look very done. They look very clean. and then at the same time, it's like, well, it's somewhat sterile.
Sure.
Yeah. So it's
On the flip side, though, with the way we can manufacture things these days, if you saw a tool mark, you'd say there's something wrong.
You'd be a little dissuaded. So that's both the plus and the negative of new and old, if you will. But they hang a nice piece of walnut on it. It's a decently figured piece of wood. Unfortunately, the show side isn't as nice as the shoot side. I call this the show side on a right-handed rifle. This is the shoot side. But nice checkering on there. I have a feeling it's probably not hand checkered as one would, but it's sharp. It's got good purchase. A generous recoil pad. That's a metal recoil pad. That was another thing on the transition models when we went to the post. We went from a metal to a plastic. So you can tell that that's not rubber when you shoot it. This is a little more cushy, of course.
This recoil, I'll call it a butt plate more than a pad. It's very reminiscent to what I recall seeing on my dad's 270 Game Master pump.
Yeah, they would have had an aluminum recoil pad on there. Yeah, or butt plate. That's a better term. You're correct. But on the modern gun, same bolt design. So we've got that large claw extractor on there,
which you brought up. Dangerous game earlier. With potentially having a little bit more confidence in a system that operates that way, and this would be a gun built to take on. I guess the what they say is would be the minimum for a dangerous game like Cape Buffalo or Elephant or things like that. But
same 3-position safety that we found on the pre-64 models, at least that lineage of pre-64. And really the manual of arms is identical to them. All the buttons are in the same place, like the bolt release is still on the side here. The floor plate release button is still forward of the trigger guard. Same, they look identical there. They look like they're just two birds of a feather, so to speak. These have the cross bolts in the stock because it is a larger caliber. If this was in a 30-06, they wouldn't have them. This one is outfit with a mid-barrel band here where you put your sling. This one has a little bit different island for the rear. So this is a raised island, whereas that's actually a turned island. So that island is part of the barrel, and then they cut a dovetail in it so that they can put the flip down rear on there. This is a safari style sight, so shallow V-notch. And then a hooded front, which they both have. And yeah, I mean the modern variant is in many ways as lovely or more than the old version. And I think you get, to your point, Mark, the benefits of modern manufacturing are certainly present, right? So the tolerancing is better, the fit and finish is better in all aspects. It's you lose the nostalgia, perhaps, of the old one, but in many ways they did a good job of keeping the nostalgia alive on the new designs. The triggers are remarkably similar from the old to the new. They're different, but they're still very similar in how they line out. My hunting partner remarks on that being one of the more robust, secure, and easy to adjust triggers out there if you know what you're doing. Really simple design too, which is appreciative. It's not this complex like Rube Goldberg machine where you pull a lever and then it starts a chain reaction of things to initially or eventually let your firing pin down. But yeah, they're a slick gun.
Lift that bolt again. Of note, you have it on the safety on the middle position.
Yes.
Which allows you to operate the bolt, but also the gun is still on safe.
Yes. So at the rear position, we have no trigger, bolt lock. In the middle position, we have no trigger, bolt lift. In the forward position, that weapon is clear. In the forward position, of course, we can lift the bolt, but the trigger goes bang, right? So yeah, 3-position safety. That it's an interesting thing. The 3-position safety. It's nice when you want the middle position to open the bolt, so you don't have to have a hot trigger. In many ways, it's kind of annoying too. Unpopular opinion.
Well, but it's an unpopular opinion, Ryan, that I share. I know folks that they will own no other rifle than a rifle with a system with that.
Sure.
I just didn't really get used to it, didn't love it, and that was part of the reason why I sold my original 243, which I liked the gun. It shot well. I made my most personally impressive shot on a coyote with it.
Sure.
Could have been more luck than skill, but he was running full tilt after a shot had already been fired at him, so he had some incentive to get out of town. And I think I shot him off my knee at about 250, and boy, it tucked it right behind his shoulder, and I think he did 2 or 3 front flips. It was quite...
Got him.
Got him, yeah.
One reason I don't care for it is when I'm like on the wrist of the rifle about ready to make a shot, like with a thumb safety, so either a tang safety like your Brownings, for instance, or like a Tikka or a Remington 700 or a Hawa 1500. Usually you can actuate that with your thumb. You don't have to really break your grip. With this one, my thumb isn't long enough that I can do that without breaking the grip. Or really, if I want control over it, I have to reach up and I have to like feather it off because I don't want to necessarily send her forward because it's loud.
Right.
And I can speak to experience for what happens when we let things down in the woods with no ammo in them from this year alone. But you kind of got to relinquish a little bit of control to manipulate the safety. And I suppose if you're in a good position, you've got control. You've got control. Big deal. But just a little minor nuance. Like my Kimber has it, the Model 70 has it. You can spend a lot of money, and you can get a cocking piece for a Remington 700 that employs a 3-position safety.
Interesting.
Yeah, you can spend a lot more money. You can get a European style 3-position for a Tikka. You'll spend almost as much as the gun to get that cocking piece in the safety mechanism.
I think I'm fine with what it came with.
Yeah, but that's the thing that they never really got rid of. So the Post 64 gun still had the wing on the side.
I mean, yeah. Speaking of never got rid of, I went to the old Winchester website today, Ryan. Got my printouts here, and just this gun has stood the test of time.
Well, yes, it has. It's been here. It's almost not been here many times.
Well, and then you talked about the World War II period where production, I believe, did shut down for a while because we were making, I guess you could say, more important things, or
Winchester,
we had a different need.
Yeah, Winchester was making arms for the military, not Model 70s. That wasn't until Vietnam.
Today, though, like I said, I printed this off. We have the Model 70 Extreme Weather SS.
That's your stainless steel synthetic version for hunting all kinds of inclement weather and terrains.
The Model 70 Extreme Tungsten MB.
Yep. So muzzle brake version, Cerakote finish instead of a stainless steel finish.
The Model 70 Super Grade Maple.
Maple stock, super grade accoutrement to include inletted swivel studs like this. A little bit better treatment. Fore-end tip is ebony. Maple because I think there's a lot of maple. I don't think there's a lot of walnut left. But I like it. At first, the first maple gun that I saw was a Model 70. I shouldn't say that. There's been maple stocks for a long time, but one of the first production guns championing the maple, and it's a bold color. It's like a honey yellow.
It is. I think that's one you either love or hate.
Yeah, correct. And the one that we had come in the shop had some unbelievable fiddle backing.
Okay.
And that thing had figure for days and days and days and days. There's other colors you can make
Not
maple.
Not to be confused with the fiddleback spider, otherwise known as the brown recluse.
Sure, that's true. There are other colors you can make maple. So if you don't love that color, you can remove that finish and add a darker stain to it and get more of a brown red.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, if you didn't love the yellow.
I'm not throwing any shade at a person who
No, I think they're beautiful.
Finds it beautiful. Not for me.
Yep. Understand.
Moving along, the Model 70 Featherweight. That was the one that captured my heart when I saw it on
I always
the rack.
love that gun because they've got this lovely little schnabel forend and a fleur-de-lis grip panel for engraving.
That's what drew me in.
That rifle on its own has kind of, or that pattern of that rifle has kind of its own, I don't know, following, like featherweights.
Oh,
Yeah,
I see.
featherweights that are pre-64s are kind of ugly. Featherweights that are post-64s are kind of sharp.
Yeah, I thought it looked elegant.
Yep, they do.
Mine had a, I don't know if it was factory or not, but the recoil pad was kind of like that orangey brown one.
That's standard. Was.
The Model 70 Extreme True Timber VSX MB.
It's got camo on it.
Yeah. This one I do like. I mean, I like a lot of them, but this is the Model 70 Super Grade French Walnut.
Sure.
Looks really, it's got the ebony fore end.
Yep. French walnut's a lovely, always nice figure in French, nice color in French.
Mm-hmm.
Oftentimes a little bit of a lighter tone.
This one here.
That's nice.
Yeah. I mean, it's like pick your poison. They just keep going, Ryan.
They do.
The Model 70 Featherweight Compact. That's the one I had, was the Featherweight Compact.
Sure.
Model 70 Super Grade.
Yep.
The Model 70 Extreme Hunter True Timber Strata MB again, camo synthetic, Cerakoted muzzle brake, and the long range MB,
mm-hmm.
which
is a variant of the old Coyote. Remember the Coyotes?
I think so. Yeah. The Model 70 Alaskan, we touched on that. Safari Express, the one we have on the table here. Extreme Weather MB. And the Extreme Hunter Escape MB, the Extreme Weather, again, synthetic stock.
All, all the extremes. Barrel. Yeah, all the extremes are going to be synthetic and stainless or synthetic and top coat treated. One of the last gun manufacturers in the U.S. that chambers 375 H&H.
So we were working on a project that we're still working on. We kind of hit pause on it a while back. Actually, it's the reason why this rifle, this 375, is here right now. We were having trouble finding any, modern off-the-rack guns chambered in 375 and 338.
Yeah, that's
a darn shame.
It is a darn shame. And, I don't know if it's just we've gotten better and, a 300 PRC with the right bullet can do a lot of 375 H&H things and some things better. And then cartridges like 375 Ruger exist, right? But you can only get them in Model 77s or number ones or custom-built guns.
Mm-hmm.
If I want a 375 H&H, CZs are gone. Remington doesn't do them anymore.
Browning's not doing them.
Winchester. I can go overseas and I can get, a German-built gun or an Italian-built gun or a French-built gun, but not or a British gun. I can't get a British gun. But, 375 H&H and 338 Win Mag, two spectacular cartridges on their way out.
I know.
Yeah.
Isn't it interesting? You would never call them a lead balloon.
Certainly
by
not.
any stretch of the imagination.
No.
And yet, though, they appear
circling the drain, man,
to be at the end of their life cycle.
Yeah. It's a damn shame. I don't think.
And I'd be guilty, too. Like, have I ever personally owned either of those? No. Are there cartridges that I'd probably pick over them oftentimes, unless for maybe a very specific situation? Yes.
Yeah.
So maybe they've just run their course.
I think that Holland and Holland will always exist because there are places in the world where that's like the equivalent of our 30-06. South Africa being one of them, right? Paul was talking about that yesterday. But 338 Win Mag, Alaska, the Yukon, British Columbia, Northwest Territories. I mean, pick a place that has Ursus horribilis there, and you're likely to find somebody with a 338. And then abroad too. It's a great heavy plains game cartridge. It's a great in Europe if you're shooting large red stag. Not that you need it, but large red stag's a great cartridge for that. But yeah, Winchester was. It was funny because that's what it came down to. That was the only way we could have it, was the Model 70s.
Mm-hmm.
Keeping those two alive.
Somebody's got to do it.
I know it. I worry that it's not long for this world, though, Mark.
It'd be a sad day.
It would. It will be. Those are good cartridges. I don't own either. There's a couple 375 H&Hs I really want. I have a 338-06
Mm-hmm.
that does 338 Win Mag things.
We had a, I sent that to you. We had a request for us to talk about the 338-06.
Yeah. I guess we'll wait till next December, huh, Mark? Maybe if I talk nice to him and compliment him, he'll let us sneak it in earlier. But yeah, it's an interesting thing. Classic rifle. They're keeping it going in classic chamberings. They've done a really good job of modernizing it too, to meet the demand of today's consumer. And I say that with the hunter in mind, not necessarily every consumer, because a couple things that I see in the industry that I'm not going to say I disagree with them, but it's just not my style. Like I was on the phone today with a number of people getting their first big game hunting rifle, and they're all kind of a heavier barrel contour, longer barrel, full featured stock.
Really?
Yep. And I think it's going to...
Chambering?
Everything was PRC.
Okay.
6.57 or 300.
Okay.
Yeah. And I don't think that's bad. I mean, they're wildly capable products. It's like that's just the way things go. I mean, we get into a groove of something that works. Why change it? Not the way I like to hunt, not the kinds of rifles I like to carry necessarily, but Winchester in the Model 70 line, like when you start looking at the extreme SSMBs, that kind of thing, they're a light gun. They're a sub 7-pound solution. They've got a bonkers tough synthetic stock. The Cerakote models are impervious to surface finish wear. Light contour, fluted, threaded barrel, like all the things that I find absolutely sexy. Really quite nice guns. I had a Model 70 come in here. It was Cabela's exclusive, but you can get effectively the same thing in the SS or in the Extreme Weather MB model. I'd never handled one. The guy came in, he unzipped the case, still had the hang tag on it, and he was putting a 3-15 Viper HD on it with a turret. His first Western gun. He had aspirations for a Kimber. Unfortunately, couldn't find a Kimber because they've changed course a little bit, and that was the next thing. He wanted that 3-position safety. He wanted that claw extractor. He wanted a light gun. And granted, he didn't get in the same weight class as a Kimber, but that was a ginger rifle. I mean, that was a sweet little system. And I think I could make room in my safe for one of those, contingent that they shoot good. But because it did have all the boxes checked, sub 7 pounds without an optic on it, and just really lovely. And they feel nice when you manipulate a Model 70 action. They feel very mechanical, but in a good way. Like as you're moving that thing to the rear of the stroke and then forward, it feels like it's doing what it should be doing. Really clever guns, and they've done a good job keeping up with what especially hunters are after. They've never really done great in the modern long range crowd. No. And for a time, and it's funny to think about that too. Before the 700 pattern was the sniper standard, it was a Model 70. It was a gun called a bull gun, and it had a heavy barrel on it, and had a wide stock that had a more aggressive vertical pistol grip that was wider on it. I mean, all the accoutrement of a modern stock design, high comb on there, set up for long-range precision target shooting. And again, to speak to that rifle's pedigree, there's this little shooting competition called Wimbledon. It's kind of a big deal. Look it up. A lot of Model 70s won that. Chambered in cartridges like 30-06 and 300 H&H.
I imagine you could win a tennis match with a rifle.
You could. And then the bull gun went on to be kind of the contemporary sniper rifle for the kind of first part of Vietnam until it eventually was replaced with the Marine Corps' M40, which was a modified Remington 700 and the Army's variant of it. And now that has carried through. So yeah, a lot of history and pedigree in the weapon system for sure. And while the new ones aren't the old ones, they're still darn good rifles.
Yeah. Yeah. Just so many elements of this rifle, like I mentioned earlier, just have stood the test of time.
Mm-hmm. You know what I'm sad I can't get, though, is this gun with a synthetic stock and a non-corroding finish on the barrel. They used to do that, and now they don't.
I feel like what you described right there should be the Alaskan.
Yeah.
Yep. Mentally for me, just knowing what kind of elements you often encounter up there.
Mm-hmm. I was with my hunting partner on the White Sands Missile Range, hunting the Kalahari Desert Oryx hunt that they have there. And he killed his oryx with a Winchester Model 70 stainless synthetic and 375 H&H.
How long of a shot was it?
It was a poke. I might be misquoting it, but I want to say it was 280 yards.
No, I'll say that we keep talking about. I don't want to keep talking about the 375, but we keep talking about the 375.
It's a great pairing in the Model 70.
Great pairing in the Model 70.
Yeah.
And it's a much more capable cartridge at distance than I think people give it credit for.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That goes for the 375 Ruger too. The bore diameter in general does a very good job. Bullet offerings are getting better for hunting bullets. But if you wanted an absolute stomper of an elk round, that'll do it. And then you can load them down if you want. Hell, you shoot full power loads. You can go kill whitetails with them. Maybe hunt them with 12 gauge slugs. No. But yeah, that was a neat shot.
We talked a little bit about optics. You've got this period correct Redfield on here for this Safari Express, Ryan. This might be your fault. I was trying to grab a Viper HD 2-10 to throw on top of it because I guess, frankly, that's what I would put on top of it also for this particular firearm and chambering. And we're out.
The people want what they want, Mark.
They've spoken.
People want what they want.
I mean, I agree. For this one, I would have put the 2-10 on there. Most everything else, the 3-15 with the turret.
Well, that's fine too.
Looks good on you, right?
Yeah, that's good for you.
Well, Ryan, I appreciate your insight into chatting about this rifle and its history. Man, I know there's a lot of folks out here that know a heck of a lot about these Winchester Model 70s. I mean, they are people are passionate about them and their history and the mystique and the nostalgia.
There's websites for them.
Yeah.
There's books about them. There's revisions of the books about them. And there's a whole, like on Gunbroker and Guns International, there are you can do your advanced and refined searches for pre-64 Model 70s.
Yeah.
They're that iconic.
Well, I know one thing I remembered when I was talking about the bolt throw, this between, its predecessor, the 54. The bolt throw on the 54, that's where I was going with that because it was built for open sights. You didn't have to contend with.
Correct. Yeah. I still want a 54. I think they're cool guns.
They look super neat.
Yeah, they don't command the price that the 70 does, and there are touch points on them that are, we'll call them less, right? They're just not as nice. But at the time, they would have been very deluxe. I still want a 54. There's a couple of older Winchesters that I'd like to own just to flesh the collection out a little bit more for hunting and for shooting and just for looking at sometimes. But yeah, 54 is one of them for sure, definitely. And that, and again, those older guns, those Model 70s, is very reflective of an era of when we built things with our hands, and we were crazy about it.
It's the way things were done.
Yeah, and so if you're sitting on one of these things in the safe, it was dad's, uncles, grandpa's, mom's, grandma's, whoever's, and you haven't been hunting it. Golly, you should be taking that thing out, letting it breathe. They don't expire.
You realize there are some people out there that are like, what are you saying, you lunatic?
Yeah, no, I'm going to keep hunting mine.
Yeah, I would too.
Yep.
Boy, you don't create memories leaving it in the safe.
Nope, you don't.
So, of course, I say that, then I'd probably have some rifles I'd be like, I'd never take it out and do anything with. Hypocrite!
Do as Mark says, not as he does.
Yeah. Well, cool, Ryan. Well, thank you. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Hopefully we tripped some folks' triggers out there talking about the good old Model 70.
You still got it.
It is just a fantastic historic rifle, the Rifleman's rifle.
Yep.
And let us know. Did we miss anything, or is there some cool stuff about the Model 70 that we missed? Let us know in the comments. Write us a letter. Send us an email.
Yeah.
Call us on the telephone.
Yeah.
Let us know. Very cool. All right, everybody. We'll catch you on the next one.
See you.
There you have it, folks. Thank you very much for listening. As usual, give this video a like if you liked it, comment something below, and give us a subscribe to the Vortex Nation podcast channel. It would mean a lot to us. Also, why don't you give us a follow over on Instagram while you're at it, at Vortex Nation Podcast. We'd love to hear from you over there, and we'll keep you updated with all kinds of cool photos and videos from our adventures that we do here. Otherwise, we will see you on the next one. Thank you again. Happy hunting and shooting, everybody. Have a good one.